Hello everybody and welcome to the Carlam Cymru revision sessions. The session this evening will focus on GCSE health and social care and will be presented by Mrs Rebecca Lewis from e-sgol Cwm Rhymney. The session will last around 45 minutes where Mrs Lewis will run through the relevant content. If you have any questions during the session, please use the question and answer, the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer your questions. You will see that there's a hyperlink in that Q&A section, which I've put there. If you're happy to leave your name and email address, we'd love to keep in touch with you and let you know about future events. You can click on the link at any time during the session. Today's session will be recorded and the recording and any relevant resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website under the Carlam Cymru tab. So thank you, Mrs Lewis, over to you.
Okay, good evening everybody. As Nia just explained, I'm going to be delivering Unit 1 today, which is the examination, the external examination, which you will be sitting on Wednesday, the 24th of May. This is relevant for both single and double award at GCSE WJEC syllabus. Today's focus will look at the different life stages and also look at what is growth, what is development, the 4 areas of development and how the 4 areas of development differ slightly during each life stage. Okay, so if we can see the following slide 2. Yeah, I'm not sure if you're still there. However, I haven't got access to move my slides at all.
Right. What happens when you click on the?
I've got the double slides at the moment, so I can see my slides twice, both on the left and right side, and I have no control over moving to the next slide.
Right. So you can't click on the presentation.
No. Are you seeing my presentation as a full screen?
There you are. You're on slide 2 now.
I just have to do it slightly differently. That's fine. Okay, thanks for your help. So as you can see from the second slide, the most basic forms of questions that you will receive in the examination will be identifying different life stages. So if you just take a minute to look at the questions on this slide and maybe read over these, have a perhaps feeling on how confident you are with this topic. I will then cover this content and we will revisit this slide to see whether we've gained confidence. Okay, so Morgan is 3 years old and attends the local nursery where he likes to play with other children. The nursery will close next week. Identify Morgan's life stage. Okay, just for your information, there are 5 life stages. Okay, and it's specific in terms of the age category of each life stage. You need to identify the name here of the life stage, but you will struggle with the name of the life stage unless you've learnt the actual age groups. The second question then, Glenda is 67 years old and swims every week at her local swimming pool. The swimming pool will be closed down at the end of the week. Again, identify Glenda's life stage. And then Daniel is 56 years old and borrows books from his local library. The library service will be closed at the end of the month. Identify Daniel's life stage. Okay. For confidence in answering this question, you need to be aware of 2 things. Okay, the things that we need to remember are obviously the names of each life stage. Okay, there are 5 life stages. However, that's not enough. We also need to remember the ages of each life stage. If then that information is with us, I feel then that we will be able to answer a question which is based perhaps on ages given to us and identifying the name of the life stage, and also then in reverse. So maybe the life stage will be given to us in terms of the name, but then we might have to fill in a box where we need to identify the correct ages. Okay, so based on this information that we have from the syllabus above, okay, obviously infancy, then I would be expecting to put 0 to 2 years of age in that box. Okay, for 65 plus, I would be looking for later adulthood, and then for adolescence, it's 13 to 19 years of age. Okay, if I was then to revisit this question based on the information that I have given you in the specification, it would be an easy 3 marks, in my opinion, then for you to identify Morgan's life stage as childhood. Okay, the WJC are quite strict in terms of the correct terminology. So in this instance, we wouldn't accept a child or children. Okay, it has to be specifically as I'm trying to write, which is a task in itself. Okay, childhood, and then you would be able to identify the blender. Then being 67 is obviously falling into the 65 plus age category. Okay, where she would be identified as later adulthood. Okay, again, an adult or an old adult or an old person would not be accepted. Okay, and we would need to get the later adulthood term correct. And then for Daniel then is 56, obviously an adult or adulthood continues up to 64 years of age. So for you to get this mark correct, I would expect you to see the term adulthood as 1 mark. Okay, so that is my information for you based on the life stages across the life cycle. Okay, remembering the 5 life stages in terms of names, and also being able to identify which age group belongs to each life stage. Any questions based on that information? Continuing then, perhaps on the lower tariff marks, is the area of growth. Okay, now in the examination from last summer, this is a question that was on the 2nd page, where you can see a diagram of a percentile chart, and then you need to be able to describe why percentile charts are used to measure growth. I will revisit this slide after I've made my explanation of percentile charts and how that is linked with growth. But I wanted just to show you what we're working towards in terms of the knowledge that's needed to answer this slide. So, first of all, we need to understand what is growth. Okay, when I'm in the classroom, I tend to teach a fair bit in codes, and I find that pupils can remember information far better when they remember codes themselves. Okay, this is the code that I've set out for growth, and hopefully this will help you remember this information. The P standing for a physical increase. So if somebody grows, normally they perhaps put weight on, for example, or maybe they have shot up in height. Okay, so it's very important to be able to say that growth is something physical that increases. And then the main things that we're looking at for you to be able to understand growth is obviously you can grow in height and also in weight. The height factor is an interesting one, and something perhaps that we need to remember here. Obviously, we can grow in height if we are able to stand. However, if we're a baby, our length is measured and not height. So we would have the baby then lying on a special measuring tool where we can then measure how long they are. Okay. Perhaps a lot of people think, well, how do we measure growth? Okay, I've given you an example of a baby lying on a mat, and we can measure them lying on the mat. Okay, we can obviously measure then individuals who are able to stand, and that would be height, weight, obviously on a weighing scale, and also the head circumference of infants. This is all then recorded on the percentile chart, which is the diagram that I previously showed you on the slide before. Why this is important, because we need to recognise if there's any early growth problems with a baby, with a young child, for them to be able to perhaps have the correct support if there are significant problems in growth. It is also nice to see if your child is growing as expected. So perhaps they could be bordering too heavy, or perhaps very tall for their age, or obviously the reverse, where they could be slightly underweight and slightly shorter for their age. And I think it's nice to see where that child fits on the chart. It's also important for you to know that there are different charts for boys and girls, because we would expect growth to differ between the two genders. And it also gives us information to show whether our child is following the normal trend for their age and gender. And again, this provides them vital information, not only to parents, but health visitors and health workers in general. Okay. I'm just now going to revisit the question that I previously shown you. So if this question was to appear again, or something similar in terms of percentile charts, the things that I would be expecting an individual to understand from this is to ensure that children follow expected patterns. Okay, and so as you can see on the diagram, we have maybe it looks a little bit like a rainbow. Okay, and information then would be plotted on this rainbow depending on your weight or your height. So your baby child might follow a kind of similar line throughout their growth over the 24 months. Okay, at the top we can see that this is the diagram for the boys compared to this one for the girls. And again, if you look at what I would call the rainbows going across, okay, we can see then that they're slightly different. Okay, so 4 described by percentile charts are used to measure growth. I would say because we want to see whether they are following an expected pattern. Okay. Now, if for whatever reason a baby or it falls below, okay, so I'm going to plot some more dots now, slightly lower. If I was a health visitor, then I would appreciate that this person is not following the expected pattern, and maybe refer them to a pediatrician. Okay, and the pediatrician then would obviously take further tests as to why this has happened. Maybe you have a baby that was born prematurely, and this would explain why they are falling short of the measurements. Okay. It also allows us to compare individuals. Okay. It also allows us to differ between both genders. That is very important. And obviously the main thing is to indicate any significant growth problems that that individual has. Okay, based on the information then for growth, okay, this is something that you can work towards with your knowledge that you have. Now then, we will move over to development. Okay, and with development, again, when I'm teaching this in my classroom, I've got a code for the pupils to be able to understand what is development. There are two codes for development. Okay, the first one is to understand what development entails. Okay, the code for this, as you can see, is a C with a double A. Development is explained by perhaps skills development, okay, emotions developing, your ability developing, and also your appearance. Okay, so this is where the SEAA appears. Now, this way of measuring development, okay, and this is called the schedule of growing skills. Okay, so please do not get confused with the term growing. Okay, as I've mentioned in the slide previously, okay, growth is ensuring that there's a physical increase in your weight and your height. Okay, and some individuals get a little bit confused because we measure development by the schedule of growing skills. Okay, I didn't name it. It's just something that we have to measure and remember. The schedule of growing skills is normally done at home, where the health visitor attends an environment where the child feels at ease. And I normally call it the box of tricks or tools, because the health visitor attends the house with a bag of activities, toys, games for the child to interact with. Okay, this can be puzzles, jigsaws, blocks, shapes, different colours, putting pegs into small holes to see whether they have the correct skills in their hand in terms of fine motor skills. Okay, and also a lot of talking to the child. Do they understand terminology? Can they communicate? How many words can they use? Do they listen to commands? And the reason that there's a variety of activities is because there are 4 areas of development. Okay, now the 4 areas of development is very easy in English to remember. Okay, and this is called your physical development, your intellectual development, emotional and social. Okay, so you're very fortunate to be able to remember development as pies. Okay, so your physical, your intellectual, emotional, social development. During your schedule of growing skills, your health visitor will ensure that she assesses your physical, intellectual, emotional and social skills to see whether you are at the right milestone for your age. Okay, so physical activities, for example, would include fine motor skills. Okay, can you build a tower of blocks? How many blocks can you put in your tower? They might also ask you to throw a ball, for example, which is obviously your gross motor skills. They might ask you to walk, to run, to hop, to step, to climb, and they can gauge then how physically developed you are. Okay. The intellectual development then is based more on your understanding of perhaps colours. Can you identify objects? Can you pick objects up off the floor that I specifically name? They also will look at whether you can recognise numbers, whether your vocabulary is correct for your age at that time. The emotional development then is how perhaps you control your emotions, how you show your emotions. Are you perhaps a very happy, smiley child, or are you perhaps quite aggressive or angry and frustrated because perhaps you can't tell somebody how you're feeling? And then obviously your social skills then is based more on how you apply yourself to different individuals. Maybe the child is very happy sitting on mum's lap or dad's lap, but when perhaps they're engaging with the health visitor, they're slightly more shy, and also how they interact with other children. Do they attend any play situations where they are happy to work alongside or play with other children? Okay. So the schedule of growing skills is very important. Okay, there are several reasons as to why this is completed for every child. Again, similar to growth, to see if now children are developing as expected. Okay, it's very important for us to be able to identify any areas of concern as early as possible so interventions can be put in place. It's also important to see can individuals emotionally demonstrate how they're feeling in a positive way and maybe in a negative way. So this could include perhaps anger, moods, happiness, and also to see, as I said, their social development, their intellectual development, and then their physical development. And this kind of bag with all the tricks and tools and toys is something quite enjoyable to watch, and a lot of parents feel proud of what their child is able to complete. Okay. So there's another example here of the physical development, and this question again was present in the examination from the summer last year. We will revisit this question because now I'm going to give you a little bit more information on physical development. However, one thing that I wanted perhaps to say before we continued on the slides, you're unaware perhaps of what age group they will ask what are the expected patterns of development for an age group, for example. Okay, so in this instance, we have Ben. They could choose a child who is 10 years of age and again ask you to describe the expected patterns of development for this age. Therefore, it's very important that you are aware of milestones, okay, for a variety of age ranges, so you have confidence in answering questions like this. Okay, so the physical development includes obviously how we grow, okay, our gross and fine motor skills, perhaps the strength that we develop towards the end of childhood and into adolescence, obviously changes that can occur during puberty, then the menopause, and features of age and aging. So in the specification, WJC specifically demonstrate or show us that we need to be aware of milestones and what can happen physically in terms of development right through our life cycle. Okay. What you must be aware of then, as I said, are the expected milestones of growth and development in each of these life stages. Okay, so it's quite a lot of information to retain. Obviously, we have the physical development, the intellectual, the emotional, and social. So this is quite a chunky piece of or area of the specification where there's a lot of information. Okay, and hopefully this session will help you understand and maybe minimize this information to the most basic form, which will obviously help you with your vision. So there are normally questions annually on what a gross motor skill is. Okay, so for those of you now who are listening thinking, well, I'm a little bit unsure, okay, gross motor skills normally involve the main muscles of the body. Okay, now I've given you an example here now of babies, okay, and what we would classify as movements that are obviously completed by the bigger movements of bigger muscles of the body. Okay, so can your baby control their head? Okay, can they sit up without support? Can they crawl? Can they stand? Can they walk? Okay, now I would say that these are pretty expected milestones during the first 2 years of a baby's life. Okay, now obviously gross motor skills also apply into childhood. Okay, but the difference in childhood is that they're not as basic as these. Of course, we can control our head. Okay, we can sit on the floor without being supported. We can run. Okay, so maybe now what I'm trying to say is that you need to be aware of, okay, gross motor skills in childhood, what would that be? So maybe you could think about riding a bike, perhaps with stabilizers, during the first few years of childhood, and then obviously without stabilizers towards the end. Can we swim? Can we use a trampoline? Can we hit a ball in perhaps a tennis match? Can we run a certain distance without stopping? Okay, so the gross motor skills don't end at the beginning of childhood. It's just their complexity changes a little bit. There are then fine motor skills, okay, and fine motor skills are movements that are done with the smaller muscles in the body, okay, and the examples that I have here for a baby and child are picking objects up from the floor, okay, can they scribble with a pen, can we stack a tower of blocks effectively, can we use our fingers to perhaps separate some Play-Doh and form some shapes, and then can we use Duplo perhaps, for example, first, and then move into Lego, where the complexity again changes, okay. Maybe then if you think of later on in life, well, how do our fine motor skills change? Okay, think about, can we control a pencil in doing a dot-to-dot activity? Can we draw within the lines and colour within the lines? Are we now able to shade certain objects when we're in adolescence? Okay, are we perhaps a good artist by this time as well? Strength, okay, strength obviously occurs later on in life, okay. I would say this perhaps is significant in childhood, and especially boys who are going through adolescence, okay. They're able to perhaps put more force towards behind movements. They can control movements in a refined way, okay. They can kick the ball perhaps further with the strength that they have. Okay, sorry, we seem to have missed something there. Let me just go. Yeah, okay, so the next stage then was puberty in physical development. Okay, now it's very important to be aware here of understanding the differences that happen to boys, to happen to girls, and also that happens to both genders. I've seen previous examination questions where students have not perhaps read the question in enough perhaps detail or understood it, and they may have asked for changes that occur to both genders, and somebody would say the testicles grow. Okay, well obviously that's not the case. We would expect answers then in terms of perhaps height increases, maybe they get spots and acne, and obviously grow pubic hair, rather than identifying changes that happen to a specific gender. Okay, I've given you one example then of obviously changes to boys and one example of changes to girls. There are several more, okay, but again I'm just trying to give you the basic information so you can go away and think, okay, what else happens to these individuals during adolescence? And then we move into menopause. Now this normally occurs in women 45 plus, okay. It's very similar to starting your period in terms of there's no specific age that's going to happen, and again in women that's the same situation. Some individuals are very emotional when this happens because their obviously period comes to an end and they can't accept the fact that perhaps they'll no longer be able to have any more children, and they can be very sad and isolated because of this. But there are also a number of physical changes that are happening here in terms of individuals gaining weight. They could feel perhaps hot, they sweat for no reason, and this is called the hot flushes, and they have a lack of energy, and eventually the periods come to an end. So it's not kind of something that, right, I've had my last period, it's never going to come back. It fades out gradually over a number of years until it comes to a complete stop. And then obviously aging, okay. I'm sure a number of you could identify features of aging in terms of perhaps having problems with vision and hearing. Perhaps energy-wise, you slow down a little bit. You're not perhaps walking about as fast pace as previous. Your joints become stiff. you're less flexible, lose your strength. Okay, there's obviously hair loss, as well as your hair turning grey. Okay, and again, there are a number of emotional effects due to aging, but this is perhaps something that I just wanted to show you in terms of physically. This is kind of what happens to us during each life stage. Okay, if we then revisit the question with regards to Ben, okay, so Ben being 2 years of age, and for you to describe the expected patterns of development for this age. Okay, now I wouldn't expect you to be putting an answer in of he can control his head. Okay, he can sit up and aid it. I would expect a little bit more from a 2-year-old who is developing with the norm. Okay, so the things perhaps that I would be expecting you to say here are that he is walking and he is very balanced whilst walking. Okay, he is potentially running, climbing, and he is, oh, sorry, I just seem to have deleted something. Able to balancing on objects. Okay, now hopefully you have thought, well, okay, I agree. These are physical patterns that are expected for a 2-year-old. Okay, but these are obviously just identifying the gross motor skills. Now the question doesn't ask here for gross motor skills specifically, so you could say the gross motor skills like I've done and gain the 2 marks. Okay, you don't need the 4 of them, I'm just giving you a variety of examples. Or you could also think, right, I've given one example of a gross motor skill. Sorry, my handwriting is not the best. Okay, so picking up items. Okay, and maybe using the palm grasp, which is the full fist in picking items up. I could perhaps be drawing or scribbling. Okay, and I could also be playing with toys. If a question like this appeared again this year, and it asks you to describe the expected patterns of development for this age in terms of physical, do not be afraid of putting a gross motor skill in and a fine motor skill. That would be my advice to my students in school, just because it shows that you can think of more than just one type of skill, for example. Okay. The next area that I'm going to help you with tonight is now the intellectual development. Okay, so as we previously did with Ben, okay, you've seen the question. Okay, if you're looking at that thinking, I perhaps struggle with that content, I'm not too sure what we would intellectually expect from a 2-year-old. Hopefully the next couple of slides will assist you with that information. Okay, so the intellectual development obviously entails how we can speak in terms of language skills, how much capacity we have in our brain, can we remember information, how do we learn, can we solve problems, and also perhaps our moral development. Okay, so bear in mind now this is covering all of the life stages, not just a 2-year-old. Okay, we're just going to have a look at a couple of different milestones that you would obviously need to remember yourself. Okay, so if we go to language skills, we can look at this as simple as children learning perhaps individual words, but prior to learning the words, the babbling begins. Okay, so you might have a baby that's just constantly babbling, is making no sense at all. However, that is a very good sign that they are intellectually developing. Okay, they're aware that they need to communicate, they're aware of how to make the noises, and then with time, those noises will eventually form words. Okay, the words then will turn into maybe 2 words put together into sentences. And what we're looking for is around 6 years of age that our children can understand and speak 10,000 words. Okay, so as you can see, from 0 to 6, there's a huge development there in terms of their language skills. Okay, so just bear that information in mind, and when we're talking about our 2-year-old and when we visit that question at the end. Their ability then, okay, in terms of can we use our mind effectively, okay. We may have several thoughts, but can we put those perhaps thoughts in a certain order? Do we have a better understanding of the world around us? How perhaps people from different countries, different cultures, perhaps celebrate different activities throughout the year. Can we imagine things? Can we solve simple problems that we're given? Are we creative? Do we have concepts of certain ideas? Can we concentrate? Can we reason? And do we have a good use of memory? Okay. Now, a lot of these things can be very basic to perhaps deliver to a child, okay. So in terms of creativeness, maybe they're drawing a house. Oh, how can we make that house perhaps a little bit more appealing to us? How can we make it nicer? And they might just put a tree in front of the house, okay. Can they concentrate on certain tasks in terms of a jigsaw? Okay, maybe it's an activity on an iPad where they're perhaps solving simple problems of putting shapes into certain baskets of activities on the iPad, and their ability will obviously increase with activities. Okay. Learning then, okay, is something that obviously is done in a number of ways, but one of the main ways that children learn are how they watch others, how they listen to others, and then they pick up on words that are said, behaviours that are demonstrated. As this obviously goes into maybe childhood and then definitely adolescence, maybe they are able to go away and research. They are using books, the internet, okay, maybe pictures, diagrams, drawings, and then from here then they are able to gain a better understanding and learn about specific topics. Children then play, obviously, in different ways. So, for example, in school, you might have stations spotted around your classroom, okay, where individuals can play with water and sand. But what they perhaps don't understand when they're playing with the water and sand is maybe their mathematical skills, their literary skills, their science skills will improve just because maybe they'll be measuring sand, they have to pour water, and they need to measure how much water they're using. Why is it not mixing? Why is it stuck? Why have we got a blockage? And it's all natural, okay, rather than saying, right, you need to play with sand and we need to do this. Their creative skills can obviously improve whilst they're doing this, okay. They can explore different opportunities, perhaps weights, perhaps textures as they're playing. And they can use building toys, okay. So I've mentioned the blocks previously, okay, maybe Lego. Maybe they have just household items where they're perhaps building a castle, for example, okay. They can solve problems then by trial and error, okay. Can they work things out themselves? How much resilience do they show when perhaps they are given a difficult activity? And also then they can differentiate between good and bad. Can they make good decisions? They have positive role models in place. Children can often push boundaries, especially in adolescence, perhaps want more freedom, perhaps want to come home later in the evening, have more use of their mobile phone, for example, and how these morals perhaps are introduced to them and given to them by their peers. Okay. Also, how parents can help their intellectual development by understanding why they shouldn't have so much screen time. Okay. So going back then to where Ben is at 2 years of age, okay. At 2 years of age, I would be expecting Ben to be able to communicate and talk to us, okay. He's using a variety of different words, okay, and possibly he is able to put these then into sentences for us, okay. He can understand commands. So, for example, I'm asking him to go and pick the pen up from the floor, okay. Sorry, I've just gone to that one. is able to understand things, okay, and he might be counting. He understands colours and can identify different colours. He also knows what is right from wrong. So we're talking about the morals here. He probably knows when he's done something that's not correct, okay. Now, the likelihood of a 2-year-old coming up in summer is very slim. However, you need to be going into these questions in a similar kind of style in terms of, do I have a bank of expected patterns of development for a variety of ages? Okay. The next one then we're going to look at is emotional development. Okay. So emotional development is down to feelings, okay, and how these feelings are hopefully given to us from a very, very early age, from being able to bond, which is forming perhaps an attachment with your parents and your loved ones, okay. How this is formed from the love, the affection, the safety and the security that is delivered to you as soon as you're born, okay. Now, attachment can occur with obviously mum, dad, and also people who have very close relationship with that individual, okay. We can obviously have skin to skin straight from birth, okay. Maybe we play with them, maybe we're responsible for feeding them, and this gives the baby the best possible start, okay. What we find then is, because they're emotionally secure and happy, then in the future they are willing to learn, they have enough respect for themselves, and they perhaps have, they thrive more later on in life, okay. And self-respect is the feelings then that you have for yourself. Now, obviously a baby is not going to have any self-respect just because they're too young and immature to be able to appreciate that, okay. I would see perhaps self-respect coming into childhood, okay, where perhaps somebody wins a certificate in school and they feel very proud about themselves in terms of how they've accomplished that achievement, okay. Obviously people can have high self-respect and low self-respect, and the effects are very different. Somebody might be very self-confident, okay, others not, okay. Perhaps there are situations that have arisen within our life that causes us to have less confidence than others. Can we control our feelings? Okay, and this is especially hard perhaps during adolescence when there are hormones, for example, raging in our body, okay, and how we can come across quite moody perhaps in our feelings just because we don't know how to express them, okay. And then maybe going into adulthood, okay, or definitely the end of perhaps range of adolescence, where we get more independence, okay. Perhaps we're looking at taking on responsibilities in a job, perhaps we go to university, where we've had those boundaries that mum and dad have given us, however those boundaries now no longer exist and I then have to make those decisions for myself, okay. Independence then is quite hard in terms of later adulthood, because obviously I might become more dependent on others and completely lose my independence just because of perhaps mobility problems, health issues, losing my partner, and then expecting other people perhaps to help me, okay. So emotionally, what I would be expecting from Ben is that perhaps he is slightly jealous, okay, of other people, okay. Maybe he has tantrums. Maybe he is showing a different of types of emotions. Okay, so he may be very happy, maybe very sad. Okay, he could be very shy with individuals that he is not familiar with. He could also be very angry at times because maybe somebody has stolen his favorite car for him, for example. Okay. And then the social development is basically how we interact with individuals, okay, and this can obviously occur very rapidly depending on how much social interaction that we have, okay. So if we look at the examples that I have now on the screen, we can see that infants perhaps look for attention, they give you items, they make noises, okay, whereas young children then may lose their temper, they perhaps imitate adults playing, okay. While we're looking at a child then of secondary school age, And where socially they want more independence. They don't want to be with mum and dad anymore. Their peers are far more important, perhaps. They want to experiment with life. They want more privacy. They want to be in their bedroom. And then obviously young adults, we have perhaps got to the stage where we have a healthy relationship, maybe having problems with a relationship, okay? And we may have difficulties behaving maturely at times because I've got all this independent. How do I deal with it socially? Maybe I'm going out several nights a week, not concentrating on my university work, or maybe the job that I have. And then older adults, how they experience perhaps more isolation because of loss of a partner. Perhaps they've lost their driver's license, perhaps they're not as mobile and socially they have problems then attending activities. Okay, so if I just finish here now on where Ben should be as a 2-year-old, okay, I would be looking for him to be wanting to make friends. Okay, I would be looking at him to be able to interact with others. Okay, obviously this depends on his level of language skills. However, he doesn't need to be able to speak. Okay, I would expect him to have certain manners in terms of perhaps sharing, for example, and taking turns. He would be very interested in playing with others. Okay, he may like to play on his own. Okay, but he might also like to play alongside others, which is what we call parallel play. So they're aware that others are there, but however they don't engage with them. Okay, and then the last slide today is obviously the 4 areas of development. So your pies, which is your P, I, E and S. Okay, and then a very, very simple example of he catches a ball thrown by his mother. What area of development would that be? Okay, so that would be physical. When his friend was hurt, he showed concern. So that is obviously a feeling, which is emotional. And then if he asks his dad lots of questions, he wants to learn. Therefore, he is developing his intellectual development.